Hello. I'm doing the live on my Instagram, and I've got to invite Katie to join. One second. Okay. You'll all forgive my tech incompetence. I think Katie is going to be here very shortly. So are we ready for this election to be over? I think most of us are. Oh, look, the Katie Kirk media people are saying nice things. Somebody's worried about our country. Well, that's completely fair. My sister, Annie Goldsmith, says you're doing great, sweetie, an homage to Kris Jenner. I appreciate that. Did I see the request? It says that Katie Kirk is unable to join, and now she's messaging. I have to approve the request. I already invited her. Let me see if I can do this again. Scroll up. You need to approve the request. I'm sure she's very frustrated with me right now. It's okay. Waiting for Katie Couric. No, I'm scrolled. There's nothing here. I don't know why we're doing it on mine. This is always going to be a disaster. Brian, scroll up. I don't see anything if I scroll up. I'm seeing a bunch of comments, but there's no, except it says waiting for Katie Couric. Yeah, there's an issue here. Sorry, everyone. Oh my God. Katie, you can sign out and then request yourself to join. Why is she requesting me? I've already requested her. The request should be at the top. It is not there. It says Katie Couric is unable to join. I assure you, okay, let me request her, and then she can accept my request. Okay, I sent a request to Katie. It says waiting for Katie Couric. Let's see whether this works.
Wow.
There you are.
Wow.
I passed the intelligence test, right?
Wow. Did you go to Harvard?
Well, you know, they make mistakes every year. What can I say?
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. No worries. I couldn't do any of this if Adriana wasn't here to help me.
Yeah, I don't have an Adriana. I just have me.
So bad, and I look so
No,
tired.
you look great.
Hi, Brian.
Hi. I think
Brian.
I broke my toe right before this, so that was exciting.
Oh no, what happened?
Well, you know, it was like a really dumb story. I think I just stubbed it against a wall like an idiot. Yeah,
Oh,
so I'm
funny.
icing. So yeah, we're doing a lot of stuff. We're talking about the election, and I'm icing my toe, so we're being very productive here.
Okay, good.
And I'm recording this for your. Does it take to start a podcast? Yeah.
No, to start an Instagram live.
Someone
just wrote.
Yeah.
2. Brian has 2. He went to Harvard and Stanford Law School.
Well,
so
Stanford's not Ivy League, so just one. Really, just one.
Well, no, you're right, but don't Stanford people? I guess Stanford people think they're better than Ivy League.
Yeah, I've got just so much ego bursting forth out of me. It's unbelievable.
Okay, Brian, I'm super tired. You're super tired, and we're gonna do and I'm actually drinking milk because Carrie made these really delicious vegan chocolate chip cookies, so I had half of one and some 2% milk, and it's quite delicious. So, hey everybody, hi friends. I just want to say hi. I have the nicest followers, Brian, and a lot of them are following you now.
Yeah, they are very nice. They're very generous.
You and Josh Shapiro are the men of the election.
Got a lot of Jewish moms clearly following you. And neither of us is
I,
single. I'm
by
sorry
the
to
way,
report.
Josh Shapiro is he was sort of into me, Brian.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's true, as I've told you, of a lot of different elected officials. I mean, you've got senators, governors, senators elect. We're not gonna go into that.
Okay, anyway, moving on. Let's talk about the election. Okay, so just give us a quick update. It feels like when are they going to call this thing to help us?
I don't know why they haven't called it. I mean, I think I know why, but it doesn't really make sense because if you're Fox or the AP and you've already called Arizona,
Yeah.
Biden wins the presidency just with Nevada. Nobody who's looked at the numbers thinks that Nevada is going to flip back to Trump. So with Nevada and Arizona, Biden hits 270. That's it. Game over. Fat lady sung, etc. Okay, if you're all the other networks, you haven't called Arizona. Take a look at Pennsylvania, where Biden's lead is pretty substantial and is getting bigger, not smaller. Now, is there an insane scenario with provisional ballots contradicting, the historic patterns of previous provisional ballots, contradicting the counties from which they came? Yes. I mean, I also could be struck by lightning right here, right now. That is conceivably possible. But Biden's going to win Pennsylvania. And
So
once you've accepted that, you get over 270, even under the count that ABC, NBC, CBS, and CNN are keeping. And
and by
therefore,
the way, sorry to interrupt, Brian, but Arizona, it seems I haven't really looked at it in the last hour. I went to the grocery store instead. But Carrie's making spring rolls. Anyway, vegan spring rolls for
wow, is she a vegan? I
appetite.
didn't know that.
Yeah, she's been vegan for about 2 months now.
Or is she
Um,
vegan-ish?
no, she's vegan. She's
Oh,
been
wow.
pretty hardcore about it. But
Uh-huh.
anyway, sorry, everybody. We digress.
Yeah.
Arizona it seems like it's tightening up, isn't it, a little bit? And I guess maybe in the event that Arizona gets too close to call, that's why maybe the networks, as you said, are waiting for Pennsylvania so they
But he
can
doesn't
feel
need
more.
Arizona. So
No,
even if you were to assume under the
no, I know he
worst,
doesn't need Arizona, but what I'm saying is maybe they're waiting for Pennsylvania where he has a more sizable lead since they didn't call Arizona. And not that Arizona, I don't know, is Arizona a little up for grabs?
I don't think so. I mean, everybody serious who's looked at this has said that, Biden's lead may narrow a bit. It's over 1 point now. It's 1.3%.
Mm-hmm.
And it may shrink a little bit, but I don't think anyone expects Trump to overtake Biden in Arizona. But okay, but then even if you say Arizona is too uncertain, and that's why NBC, CBS, ABC, CNN have not called Arizona. You go over here to Pennsylvania, and Biden's lead is about 14,000 votes and growing. And then, okay, I'm going to dip down into where the rest of the votes are. You still have a bunch of Philadelphia votes yet to count. Yes, you have some provisionals, but they are not going to be strongly Republican enough to overcome the 80-20 margin that Biden is getting from a lot of votes out of Pennsylvania. I mean, I think there's actually, most people think that Biden's margin in Pennsylvania is going to be significantly bigger in the end than Trump's margin was in that state 4 years ago when all the Republicans were proclaiming a landslide,
We're going to use this for the podcast. So as fascinating as Carrie's veganism is, let's talk about broad general trends about what this election showed us. And we don't have to do this too long, but real quickly before we do that, because I think people watching will want to know, when do you think Pennsylvania will be called? Because that's game over, as you said.
I think it could be called at any time. Maybe they're, just triple checking, being extraordinarily cautious, and they're waiting on more votes to come out of Philadelphia, which could, come this evening. And I think Biden is expecting it. The Biden campaign, which has been pretty cautious, has signaled that they're going to deliver a victory speech of sorts in prime time tonight. And I don't think they would do that unless they had some expectation that those votes were going to come in. So I would be surprised if it weren't today.
All right, let's talk about, we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff, everybody, and feel free to give us your questions, and we'll answer them as best we can. And Brian will answer most of them probably. But was this election a huge repudiation of Donald Trump? When you see that the Republicans gain houses in, when you see the Republicans gain seats in the House, when you see that it looks right now with a Georgia runoff expected, 2 Georgia runoffs expected, that they're holding the Senate majority, but yet the president wasn't able to pull it off. So was this really about Donald Trump and Donald Trump only?
Well, it certainly was not a huge repudiation of Republicans. Republicans down ballot, for the most part, seem to outperform the top of the ticket a little bit. Often you'll see the opposite. And in terms of the presidential race itself, Trump performed pretty respectably. I mean, he won Ohio, he won Florida, pretty comfortably. He won North Carolina. He kept it close in a number of the other key battleground states. Now, in terms of the popular vote, it's not going to be that close. I think Biden's on track to win the popular vote by 5 or 6 or even 7 million. I think it's going to be a bigger popular vote margin than Obama's over Romney in 12. But the Electoral College, which is where this is really fought and decided, was a bit closer. I think Biden's on track for 306, which is precisely the number, as we've discussed, that Trump got 4 years ago. So I think there's going to be some soul searching, frankly, in both parties about, what they got right and what they got wrong. And it's really a mixed bag for both.
You're right. I mean, I think President Trump did much better than a lot of people expected. And I think it just underscored once again how divided this country is, that so many people still really felt more comfortable with Donald Trump than Joe Biden for a host of reasons. What primarily do you believe were the reasons, Brian?
I think it was primarily ideological. I think there were a number of voters who were uncomfortable with Trump personally and temperamentally. They had doubts about his capacity for the job, but they were convinced, based on their own predispositions to be kind of center or center right, that the Democrats were a little too extreme, that Biden was a Trojan horse for the radical left. I mean, I worked in Florida this cycle, and we did 7 or 8 focus groups with Trump 2016 voters who were considering voting for Biden. And that argument resonated with them. They were scared by what they saw, that the media was focusing heavily on Bernie and Warren and AOC. They had gone through this kind of summer of racially charged protest, of riots, of, defund the police, which is perhaps the worst political slogan in American history, with the possible exception of socialist. And they heard both those things, and I thought it was striking. Abigail Spanberger, who's a congresswoman from your home state of Virginia.
I saw that.
Or home Commonwealth, I should call it, right?
Yes.
She was on this call with other House Democrats, kind of hashing over the election return. She barely survived. She's from a tough red to blue district. And she erupted, and she's a pretty mild-mannered, national security professional, moderate Democrat. And she just said, unless we excise socialism, defund the police, this kind of hard left stench from our party, we're going to get, bleeping walloped or something to that effect in 2 years. And it is a problem. I worked a congressional race, which is still too close to call, in a Republican district in Northern California. And what did the Republican independent groups choose to focus on in the last 2 weeks of the campaign? It was defund the police, it was socialism, it was riots, it was anarchy. And I think for a lot of, and rightly or wrongly, for a lot of white swing voters in suburban communities, that whole line of argument was really scary. And I think, and you also saw finally in the exit polling, the voters who decided at the end, just as in 2016, broke for Trump. Now we'll see how the exit poll evolves as it's kind of reweighted and adjusted as we go, but I think that's pretty significant too.
And I think that's probably a word of warning for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in terms of how they approach governing, if in fact Joe Biden is elected, as it appears he will be, that when it comes to, holding on to progressive principles is one thing, like healthcare, fixing healthcare, pre-existing conditions, even universal healthcare, potentially something like the Green New Deal, as long as it doesn't put a ton of people out of work. I mean, I think all those things are going to have to be seen through a new lens, don't you? Not that they're not important issues to tackle, but it has to be done carefully, right?
Yeah, I mean, and Biden was thoughtful during the campaign about distancing himself from some of these ideas. He did not endorse the Green New Deal. He said he had his own plan. He publicly, repeatedly broke from defund the police. He said rioters should be prosecuted. And he needed to do all of those things. The question is, why did he need to do all of those things? Why was that even a conversation that was happening? And it was because some activists who were almost exclusively from deep blue urban areas were pushing those issues to the detriment of politicians who had to compete on much less friendly terrain. And in order for the Democrats to govern, to win the Senate, to have a significant majority in the House, they got to win a lot of areas that are center right in this country. And this stuff is challenging.
I think that Claire McCaskill talked about that this morning. I saw her saying that the progressive wing of the party has to appreciate people who are running in much more conservative areas. I thought about my sister, who was running for lieutenant governor with Mark Warner before she was diagnosed with cancer and had to drop out of the race. But she was really good at she was quite a moderate Democrat of working with people in Charlottesville, but also in larger Albemarle County, which was quite, had a lot of conservative voters there as well. And, I think we talked about it last night, Brian, sort of cancel culture and this self-righteous smugness that you're an idiot if you don't see things my way, which I think can feel like it's coming from uber progressives, can be very off-putting to more moderate voters.
I mean, you can believe two things at the same time. You can believe there is a history of systemic racism in this country, that systemic racism is a problem here now today that has to be addressed, that there needs to be more economic opportunity. Those are majority positions. Black Lives Matter has a majority favorability rating in the country. So you don't want to overlearn the lesson. Voters of color are the core of the Democratic Party. You don't want to push them away. But you also don't want to push away the 70% of the electorate that is white and that feels like they're being blamed. They're being excluded. They're being chastised.
Or schooled. I don't know whether I told you this, Brian, but I feel the same way, that it is possible. Everything has become so black, white, left, right, that you can want to reform the police department and feel that it's patently unfair that Black men are subjected to profiling and police brutality much more often than white people. You can also respect and appreciate what the police do and support Black Lives Matter. And there was a Venn diagram that Billie Jean King put on her Instagram. I don't know if I told you this. It might have been David Brooks I was talking to. I get all you guys mixed up.
We're confused for each other all the time. Yeah. It's so anti-Semitic of you, Katie.
In the middle, it said me. And it was Billie Jean, and I thought, why do we have to necessarily pick sides? And say you're either pro-police or pro-Black Lives Matter. And I guess a lot of, activists will say, well, you can't be both. But I think that's honestly where a lot of people are. They want to respect and appreciate good policing and good officers, and also help them be better officers and weed out bad officers. And, but as somebody who is not a Black person, I have a different outlook and a different life experience. So I cannot necessarily, appreciate what it's like to be a Black man in America. And so I understand the anger that has been built up over years and years and years of racial profiling and just out and out racism. Anyway.
I completely agree with that, but let me just say, if you listen to the voices of Black people and Latinos, support for defund the police was actually significantly less among those groups than among the white left. This is more of a kind of white elite left issue than it is among actual Black and brown voters. My favorite example of this is the term Latinx, which is, the very kind of hip woke term for Latinos and Latinas in this country. Only problem with it is, if you actually listen to Latinos and Latinas, Hispanics, they identify those terms with those terms. They understand those terms. They don't know what Latinx is. And Ruben Gallego, who's a Hispanic member of Congress from working class Latino district in Arizona, the day after the election tweeted, one thing we got to start doing if we want to win over more Hispanic voters or Latino voters is stop using the term Latinx because they don't understand it. Pew did a poll that showed that only 3% of Americans, actually I think it was 3% of Latinos, had ever heard the term or used the term Latinx. So to me, that's like exhibit A of the disconnect sometimes between, what are known as like extremely online people who are primarily upscale and white and urban, and the voters the Democrats need to win.
That's interesting. Yeah. Oh, so let's talk about some other lessons that we've learned here. So we've realized that the socialism message, the anti-socialism message, really resonated with a lot of voters. What about the economy? And I don't think, do you think that the Biden campaign made a strong enough connection between getting COVID-19, getting the pandemic under control, and jump-starting the economy?
I think they tried. Biden gave a number of speeches and interviews on this topic. I think they were aware of the challenge. So I'm not going to fault what they did or didn't do, but the net result was insufficient. Even coming off the worst economic collapse in history, even with the worst jobs record of any president since Hoover, Trump went into Election Day with a consistent advantage on who do you trust to handle the economy. And that was a problem. The economy is usually one of the biggest issues, if not the biggest issue. I believe that once all the exit poll data is kind of weighted and compiled, we will see that it's the biggest issue again in 2020. And Democrats cannot lose on the economy. That's kind of the core of who we are. We're fighting for more economic opportunity. And I sometimes worry, or at least I worried over the course of the Trump presidency, that a number of Democrats were so distracted by the horror show of Trump that the message kind of boiled down to, this is not who we are. America is better than this. Trump's behavior is abominable. And a lot of people would agree with that. And then they would still support Trump because they thought that Trump was more able to deliver economic improvements for them in their lives. And so, a huge focus for Joe Biden from day one has got to be helping people rebuild economically, helping the country rebuild economically. And this leads, unfortunately, to the discussion about, in all likelihood, Democrats are not going to have the Senate. And it's going to be very, very difficult for Democrats to get things done legislatively.
Having said that, as I said last night, is there a chance, because of Biden's personal relationships with some of these folks, that it will just be less rancorous and it will, or do you think they're going to be complete obstructionists? You and I, of course, I interviewed Mitch McConnell at Yahoo and asked him about saying, as soon as Barack Obama was elected, we're going to spend, our number one job for the Republican Party is to make sure he isn't reelected. Which, not even a honeymoon period of saying, what can we do together? And of course, healthcare passed with not one Republican vote. And so, do you have any optimism that after an exhausting 4 years that the parties possibly could work together?
I think it is possible on a few issues that a few Republicans, Susan Collins or Mitt Romney, or, Republicans without any kind of national political ambitions, Republicans who are not afraid of their base, Republicans who do, feel a sense of responsibility to the country, may work with him on those things. But I hope I'm wrong. I think by and large, what the Obama presidency taught us is that the Republicans, for the most part, have decided that the best political strategy is to oppose the Democratic president at every turn. And therefore, when the Democratic president can't get certain things done and gets no bipartisan support, the Republicans are able to blame him for those things, and voters blame the president for those things. So, Obama, I think over and over again, was willing to meet the Republicans halfway, sometimes even more than that. They weren't willing, in many cases, to move an inch. And yet, in 2010 and 2014, the voters blamed Obama for being unable to produce, bipartisan legislative successes. So it's a kind of a cynical strategy, of course, but it's an effective one. And I think, McConnell and most of the Senate Republicans are going to look very quickly to 2022 when they have the opportunity to expand their majority potentially in the Senate, to win back the House, which is far more possible today than it looked, before this election. And I think the obstruction strategy is going to feel like the right strategy to them.
Well, that's a bummer, but, let's see. And also with the runoffs, if the two Democrats win in Georgia, and you were saying before in another conversation we had that turnout is very difficult when you don't have a presidential election. So it might be more difficult, although Stacey Abrams has built quite an organization in Georgia, and I'm sure we'll be working very hard for these Senate races. You don't think, what about, do you think
it's not impossible? I think there's a chance. I do think there's a chance. I think, Biden's going to win Georgia. So the votes are there. But, do all those votes from a presidential election turn out in January for a Senate runoff? Maybe it's possible. If I had to bet money, I would bet that the Republicans tend to turn out more. Republicans historically do better in these off-year elections because they show up over and over and over again, and Democrats tend to vote more intermittently and mostly in presidential years. And so, Biden certainly knows the stakes. I don't think they're going to want for money. I think Act Blue will funnel, millions and millions of dollars to these two, very impressive, attractive Democratic candidates. But I think it's a heavy lift. But we should try. We should certainly try. But I'm trying to give you honest analysis about what I think the likelihood is.
Well, I appreciate that because, it's kind of a lost art form at this point in time, isn't it, Brian, to not have such a deeply partisan spin on everything. In closing, let's talk about what Donald Trump does now. By the way, the presidency has not been called for Joe Biden as of this conversation. It may be Friday night. By the way, a lot of people are asking about Kamala Harris's Senate seat, Brian.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just talking about this actually on a different interview, and I think I think there are two front runners. Newsom, the governor of California, gets to pick Kamala's successor, Vice President-elect Harris, in my view. I think those are Karen Bass, who was a runner-up for the VP slot, who is an enormously impressive person, a master legislator, the first Black woman Speaker of the California Assembly. You know, I know her, I like her. She'd be a terrific choice. And by the way, you then get another Black woman in the Senate to replace the only Black woman in the Senate now. The second choice, who I think is probably more likely to get picked, is Alex Padilla, who is California's Secretary of State, who would be the first Latino senator ever from California. That is, you know,
that's sort of hard to believe, isn't it?
It is hard to believe, and we're a majority minority state. Latinos are actually, by proportion of population, the biggest group in California, slightly edging out whites. But in terms of voters, have been quite underrepresented over the years. And I think the governor feels a deep sense of history. He also goes back a long way with Padilla, who actually, and the 6 junkies watching this will appreciate it, when Newsom ran for governor in the primaries against Jerry Brown 10 years ago, Alex Padilla was actually the chairman of Newsom's campaign. So they go back a long way. And I think, you know, and he's very impressive. And I think, you know, if I had to bet, he would probably get picked.
Let's talk about turnout. I understand this is going to be the largest turnout in something like 100 years. I think people were perhaps more engaged in this election than they have in any election of my lifetime, certainly. Do you have any idea about the turnout numbers? Did a lot of young people come out and vote? Did a lot of seniors? Or is it hard to tell until all the mail-in ballots are counted and we can really analyze the people who voted?
It's hard to tell accurately demographic by demographic, but I can say overall turnout is way up. We know that. I mean, and on both sides, which is, I think, a surprise to a lot of people. People were expecting a blue surge. They weren't expecting a red surge, and we got both. So, you know, Trump is now just under 70 million votes. I think he got 63 or 64 million last time. Hillary got, I think, 66 million last time. Biden is now at 74 million. I mean, I think he's going to get to 75 million once California is fully counted. So huge increase in turnout on both sides. And I would be shocked if it weren't, you know, driven by young people as well as older people. But, you know, the thing that the Trump people got mocked for years, saying that they were going to bring out a lot more white non-college voters. Turns out they probably did. I think the blue surge was clearly bigger and overtook them. But, you know, the Republicans turned out and Trump's supporters turned out, and they are going to be a force in our politics, a huge force for years to come. And I would not bet against anyone whose last name is Trump in the 2024 Republican primaries.
In fact, I saw last night there was an article that said he had already been discussing, by the way, I can't vouch for this, but it was, I think, Mediaite, saying that he had already been floating the idea of, if he lost, about running in 2024. I was going to tweet it and say, too soon.
I think it's very possible. I think it's very, very possible. And a lot of people are talking about that. He would be 78, which is about Joe Biden's age. He would want to, of course, avenge his loss. I think if the Democratic nominee is Vice President Kamala Harris, he would relish the opportunity to have a full-on race and gender war against somebody who symbolizes the America that he is fighting against tooth and nail. You know, David Axelrod had this great line that, you know, Joe Biden was very culturally inconvenient for Donald Trump. And it's true, you know, working class kid from Scranton, PA, not part of the 60s protest movement, not part of the 2020 woke squad. it was very hard to demonize Joe Biden or to make him a scary figure. I mean, in fact, Donald Trump bought himself an impeachment trying to disqualify Joe Biden because he knew, I mean, give him credit, he knew very early on that Biden was going to be a deeply problematic opponent for him. Well, I don't think he views Kamala Harris the same way. Now, he may be really underestimating her, and she may build an equally, if not more powerful coalition driven by, different demographics. But I just think from the, from inside, Trump's kind of prejudiced, addled, heat-seeking brain, I think the possibility of running against a woman and a Black woman, I think is probably, in a sick way, very appealing to him.
Let's talk about criminal charges that any of the Trump family may face. Is that a possibility at all, given all the investigations that are going on in the Southern District of New York about, improprieties with his charities, certain things that have been done tax-wise? Do you think that those will go anywhere?
Yeah, I think they might. I think you have the New York State Attorney General looking into Trump's business and his charity, his fraudulent charity. I think you have the Southern District of New York looking into this stuff. And I think the great unanswered question is, does Trump try to pardon himself? I actually have very little doubt that he's going to try to pardon everyone around him. I think that's how he's going to try to buy the loyalty of all of these people who haven't kind of, flipped, to use the mafia parlance. But I think it is a kind of uncertain legal ground for a president to try to pardon himself. That could go to the Supreme Court.
I was going to say,
Amy Coney Barrett the deciding vote on that? I don't know.
Can a president can in fact pardon himself or one day herself?
Well, no one has tried before. Nixon, had enough propriety that he wouldn't even dream of trying. But I don't think Trump respects these norms and traditions at all. And so if it's I certainly don't think Bill Barr is going to stand in his way. I think he's going to get a favorable opinion from Barr's Justice Department. And then it'll probably be, fought out in the courts. And if there's anything we know about Trump, that, he pushes the limits, and most of the time he gets away with it. You just can't even remember. It like washes over us, all of the stuff that he's done, any one of which would have been like a presidency ending scandal for previous presidents. And yet he just, like Old Man River, he just keeps rolling along. And, I think he may try.
What about these claims of voter fraud that seem to have absolutely no merit? It saddens me to see people on this live interview still claiming fraud. And people who follow me on Instagram saying things need to be, excuse me. That was a cute little sneeze. Things
as opposed to like a big disgusting sneeze. You were worried that it would be the latter.
But
I can't stand when people hold in their sneezes, by the way. I don't know why people do that.
I don't know, but it's not healthy.
No.
But anyway, so what about these claims of fraud of all kinds of things, voter suppression? Do we know if we've heard that there have been no incidents or very few incidents, or I guess 0 incidents. I'm sure there have been some cases of sketchy things going on. I mean, can you really have an election with 0.0 cases of kind of questionable voting behavior?
Yeah, there've got to be a few, but no one has presented any evidence of anything significant. I mean, I don't think anyone's presented any evidence of a single ballot in this cycle being, fraudulent in the sense that somebody tried to like double vote or cancel out somebody else's vote or something like that. I mean, people make plenty of mistakes, of course, and we're seeing that all over Pennsylvania in a way that, by the way, advantaged Donald Trump, not Joe Biden, because people had to kind of go through this complicated new procedure with an inner envelope and an outer envelope and signatures. And I mean, it was a whole thing. But, I give great credit to Pat Toomey, the conservative Republican senator from Pennsylvania, who went on the Today Show this morning and said, there's just no evidence for what the president's saying, and he ought to quit saying it. But there is a divide in the Republican Party between the retiring Republicans, Toomey's not running again in 2022, who are being honest about this stuff, or the retired Republicans who many of whom supported Biden, and the Republicans with ambition, who are in some cases fanning the flames. Now, I will say Kevin McCarthy, the House Republican leader, went on Fox last night, said that Trump won the election, definitively said that Trump won to the big Fox primetime audience. I think he was on the Laura Ingraham show. He then posted that on social media, knowing exactly what he said, spread it around, and then today walked it back. Today, he said he was misunderstood. And what he meant was that Trump had won by helping down ballot House and Senate Republicans, which of course was not what he meant. But I do think it's noteworthy that he felt the need to walk it back. That, you have the news voices on Fox who are mostly being pretty responsible here. I mean, Apparently Trump is calling Rupert Murdoch and others and yelling about the Fox coverage, that they're not parroting his line that the whole thing was stolen. I think Fox, on some level is already looking a little bit past Trump, and they may actually have a, set aside whatever their moral views are. They have a business interest in potentially being kind of the opposition party, because historically their ratings have gone up, not down, when a Democrat's in the White House.
Right. So let's talk about the concession speech. Will it?
You think there will be one? I don't think there's ever going to be one.
That's my question. At some point, do you think if Donald Trump has lost, that he really wants to go down in history as the most churlish, most bitter, defeated president of all time? It's such, I know.
Better than being a loser. I think for Donald Trump, there were always only two outcomes to this election. Either he won or it was stolen. Those are the only two possible outcomes.
He was setting the foundation for that for months and months and months, despite the fact that mail-in voting was always going to have to be a necessary thing, especially in the midst of a pandemic. So I was watching John McCain's concession speech in 2008.
I saw you posted that. Yeah.
Hillary Clinton's in 2016, which someone said was not gracious, and that could not be further from the truth. It was moving, but she was, very magnanimous towards Donald Trump, which, must have just gone up her ass a mile. I can say that, can I? It's a podcast.
Wow, I've never heard that expression before. That must be a Katie expression. I know it's gone up her ass a mile.
But it must have been. She must have been like choking on her words, saying,
"Wow, we're going choking up her." Okay, we're not going to go there.
Okay, Brian, stop.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you think what is going to happen in the next 2 months before the inauguration?
I think he is going to be churlish and uncooperative. I think he's not going to be physically dragged out of the White House. I think he's going to leave, but I think that is the most he will do. I think, and again, I hope to death that I am wrong. I don't think he's going to send the message to the dregs and crooks who populate his administration to cooperate in any sense with the incoming administration. I think Biden, based on the combination of COVID and the economy and Donald Trump, is going to have by far the worst and most difficult transition of any incoming president ever. I think Trump is going to say that, the deep state plotted against him, the fraudulent votes and big media and big tech and all this stuff that he's using is what pushed him out of the White House, but he knows he won, and you know he won, and this is all a fraud, and Biden's illegitimate. I don't think he's going to invite the Bidens in for the traditional coffee before the inauguration. I don't think he's going to attend Biden's inauguration. I'd be surprised if he did that. Traditionally, of course, the outgoing president invites the president-elect shortly after a couple days after the election to the White House for a very civil and cordial meeting. The last election like this was when Obama defeated Romney, and I think a couple of weeks after the election, Obama invited Romney in for lunch, and they had a very, by all accounts, a very friendly, cordial conversation for about an hour. President Obama invited President-elect Trump to the White House, I think 2 days after the 2016 election, and had him to lunch. And I just think he's gonna, he's just blowing up all the norms. And the real loser is our institutions and our democracy and public trust. And this is really dangerous stuff.
And to think we thought it was a big deal when the Clinton White House removed all the W's from the keyboards.
Apparently that didn't happen. The funny thing is that story went all over the place. And if I'm not mistaken, the fact checkers who looked at it, later discovered that didn't happen.
Really? That's such a good story. And that was so funny that they would take the W's.
The W's, I mean, maybe they did, but I mean, the stories I saw said that didn't. Or maybe one person did.
I was going to say maybe one person did, and suddenly it became the whole place.
Everyone did it. Yeah, exactly.
Well, Brian, it's been so fun talking to you about all this stuff. You guys can see why I always call Brian when I have political questions.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you for being a guest on my Instagram Live. For my tens of followers, most of which are like my sisters and my wife. I'm sure it was such an honor for you to be on my platform.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Brian.
I mean, yeah, it's like being on Lady Gaga's Instagram right now. I'm sure it's a very similar reach.
Well, people are missing our podcast, so maybe we'll have to resurrect our podcast when you're not too busy making a lot of money through all your political consulting.
Yeah, the big political consulting money for sure. It's almost as big as the Instagram money. Yeah, exactly. Although maybe I can get maybe I can hawk some products.
Hey, Molnar's got a sponsor for Molnar's Table, man. Life is good.
Oh, I can't keep up with that guy. I just like comparing myself to Cary Grant. That's very difficult to do. Who's his sponsor?
That's true. Huh?
Who is his sponsor?
Life is Good, which is a really great company out of Boston that is a t-shirt company, and now they make a lot of apparel, but it's a company that's really focused on positivity. And it's a really cool company. So they're nice to sponsor it. And he interviewed Michael J. Fox this week. They've become good friends. They golf together, and he said,
he's hanging out with celebrities all the time.
No.
That's true.
No. I didn't mean to sound
I know, that. I'm teasing. I'm teasing you. I know, I'm teasing.
But they've gotten to be friendly, and Michael is just, such an incredibly inspiring figure. I think one of the most inspiring people I've ever met. And as you know, Brian, I've met a lot of people, and I'm in awe of him and his attitude and the way he's dealt with this very debilitating disease for many, many years now. So that should actually be a really moving conversation, because he's written another book about, staying optimistic. So we all can take a lesson from him when we start wallowing in our self-pity and look at somebody like Michael J. Fox and what he has been able to endure and continues to persevere. So that's my little kumbaya moment.
That's a nice ending. I like that a lot. And by the way, I remember your conversation with Michael J. Fox on CBS in 2006. And I was an associate producer for you at the time, and it was a big deal to have gotten him, and it was really moving. He talked about support for stem cell research, and I think it was really one of the first times that people had seen him with the kind of the symptoms of his disease, very kind of obvious, and that was quite affecting.
I remember he was shaking so much his mic came off his lapel of his jacket. and it was a live interview, and I had to kind of pick it up and very kind of casually place it back on his lapel, and which was, I don't know, it just added to the poignancy of his situation, I think.
And do you remember what Rush Limbaugh said after that interview?
No.
That he was faking his symptoms because he was trying to.
I do remember that.
Yeah.
Good old Rush.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry I really ruined the nice ending that you were building up there.
Why did you have to bring us down?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Anyway, well, Brian, I hope you can get some rest this weekend and spend some time with your family and have a cocktail or 8. And and it should be a very interesting couple of weeks, couple of months coming up. And I really pray that there isn't violence on the streets, because everything is so heightened, and that we can somehow come together and get back to the hard work of solving some of the really serious problems that exist in this country that will help so many, not just Biden supporters, not just Trump supporters, but just plain old Americans who really need some hope and positivity and opportunity. So I know I'm an optimist. But...
No, amen to that. And by the way, the one optimistic note I will give you is that in those focus groups I mentioned before out of Florida, the most powerful message for people was about bringing the country together again, about unity, about getting on one team, no more red and blue. And so I think people are hungry for that. They're sick of this anger and division and this supercharged rhetoric. So hopefully, this new administration is will turn the page.
Bomb.
Yes.
For all the rancor. All right. Well, everyone, thank you guys for joining us. And now I just feel like I'm talking to Brian on a FaceTime telephone call. I better stop, because I probably will say things I regret. But anyway, Brian, thank you. And thanks everybody for participating in these conversations. We hope you've enjoyed them. I certainly learn something every time I talk to Brian, and I hope everybody has a great weekend, and you can take a break from politics for a few hours at least. I know I'm going to. Yeah,
ditto.
Okay.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye, Brian.
Love you. Bye.
I love you too. Yes. Wait. Oh, you have to end it.
Oh.